I've been thinking about something a lot recently, and maybe it's because I'm getting older, or maybe it's because I finally have enough space in my life to actually stop and think. But I keep coming back to the same question. Was it worth it? Because Gen X was raised to believe something very specific. And that was if you worked hard, stayed responsible, kept pushing forward and striving, eventually it would all pay off. And so we did exactly that. We worked hard for decades, and many of us became very good at it. We became productive, reliable, independent, capable, and resilient. But somewhere along the way, I think a lot of us became really tired too. And I'm not just talking about physically tired, I'm talking about mentally and emotionally tired. And now, many of us are reaching this strange stage where finally we're able to slow down and take it easy. But we're actually slowing down enough now to ask ourselves, what was all that striving for? And did we accidentally give too much of ourselves away in the process? I think Gen X is quite a unique generation. We grew up in a completely different world, an analogue childhood followed by a digital adulthood. And we adapted to enormous change. If you think about it, we went from a landline that our parents would lock with one of those ring-turn padlocks so you couldn't dial out, to everybody having a smartphone at their fingertips. We watched technology completely reshape life in real time. I mean, who can remember life before the internet? And alongside all of that change, many of us learned independence from a really early age. We were the latchkey kids, told to go off and entertain ourselves. Boredom wasn't an option. If there was a bit of wood and some twigs, then we would be building things and entertaining ourselves for hours on end. We'd be let loose after breakfast and we wouldn't come home until tea time. And if we needed to make ourselves a sandwich, that's exactly what we did while waiting for our parents to come home from their working day. You just got on with things, you figured it out. You didn't talk endlessly about your feelings, and you coped, you adapted, you just carried on. And in many ways, those experiences made us resilient. But I also think they made many of us emotionally self-sufficient to a fault. We learnt very early on that being dependable mattered, that working hard mattered, that pushing through mattered. And honestly, for a long time, I believed all of it completely. I genuinely thought that if I kept working hard enough, eventually I would arrive at this magical stage of life where everything finally felt settled, peaceful, secure, like I'd made it somehow. And maybe some of you watching feel exactly the same. I think many Gen Xers followed a very similar life script. Work hard, buy the house, build security, keep going, be responsible, delay gratification, and don't complain. And to be fair, in many ways it worked. It helped us build careers. We raised our families, we built our homes and our security, we paid off mortgages, and we created that stability. We did what we were supposed to do. But I think the emotional cost of that way of living is something that we're only just starting to understand now. Because when I look back, I realise how much of life was spent rushing, always planning, always working, always preparing for the future. I had 5-year life plans, 10-year life plans, and I would be dishonest if I said that I didn't have a 20-year life plan where I've mapped out all of our financial security, where I've planned the things that we want to see before it's all too late, where I've thought about what might happen with our health down the line, and therefore what we need to be doing in the next year, the next 2, 3, 4 years, before things deteriorate too much. When you look at life and what success means from the outside, there is this constant low-level pressure underneath it all. The feeling that you can't ever really stop and take stock. And I think so many of us became focused on building a life that we didn't fully notice that we weren't living the life that we already had at the same time. And that's the part I think about now. The moments I missed because my mind was somewhere else. The years spent exhausted, but calling it normal. The belief that rest was something that I would be able to have later. And I don't think Gen X invented hustle culture, but I do think that we absorbed it and owned it deeply. Because that achievement was very much tied to our identity. Being productive felt valuable. Being busy felt responsible, and slowing down almost felt uncomfortable. And to be honest, 18 months into retirement, that's the bit I'm really struggling with, is that slowing down and some days doing nothing, having nothing planned. And it makes me feel really restless, like I've got an itch that I can't quite scratch. And I really do find it difficult to sit in that discomfort. And I am struggling to acclimatise to it. To be clear, I'm not saying hard work is meaningless, and I'm genuinely grateful for all of the things that hard work has given to me in my life and has allowed me to do now that I'm in my 50s. The opportunities and the experiences, the security that we created, the choices that we now have as a result of that. And I know many people watching may still be struggling and working incredibly hard just to stay afloat and to work towards having that secure future. So this isn't about dismissing work or ambition. It's more a question of how do you achieve balance? Because I think many Gen X have reached the point that they were striving for, but then discovered something quite surprising. The finish line didn't feel the way that they expected. You finally slow down, and then suddenly there's all of this space to think, and you start questioning things. What actually mattered? Was it worth the stress? What wasn't worth it? Who are you when you stop constantly doing? And perhaps the strangest thing of all, many of us spent decades wanting freedom. But when freedom finally arrived, we didn't know how to exist inside it because we'd built our identities around striving. I think one of the reasons so many people in midlife feel emotionally exhausted is because we've been carrying responsibility for such a long time. working, paying the bills, building our family, supporting our children, supporting our parents, paying off the mortgage, meeting all of the expectations. And many Gen Xers became experts at coping quietly. You just keep functioning, even when you were overwhelmed, even when you were emotionally drained. You carried on because that's what responsible adults do. And in fact, I was talking to a friend yesterday and I was explaining the difference in my life now that I have retired. And I said, one of the things that I missed, but one of the things that I feel relief from is being the person for everybody else around me, helping build their careers, helping counsel them, sorting out problems, coaching people to solve their own problems. And all of that takes a toll, but you can still miss it at the same time because it is tied into who you are as a person. But eventually, and certainly towards the end of my working life, it all catches up with you. It doesn't happen dramatically. It's just this quiet realization, a feeling that things have gone incredibly quickly. Time suddenly feels much more visible, that there are probably fewer years ahead of you than there are behind you. And I think that changes people. It changes what success means for you, and it changes what matters. And again, part of that conversation yesterday was talking about not investing yourself emotionally into your work, being proud of the work that you do, being committed to the work that you do, but not making it part of your soul, because eventually you leave and you divest that part of you, and you don't want to leave part of your soul behind and your energy behind. You want to have enough energy left to give to the future you. The older I get, the less I am interested in what other people think about me and the choices that I make. And I think that was also something that I needed to leave behind, because I was so tied to my value being what others thought of me. And actually, my value is in just me as a person. And other people's behavior towards me doesn't equate to my worth. So in this now new phase of my life, I'm more interested in having that mental peace and space, enjoying the time that I've got, finding value in freedom to think about, okay, Monday morning, I can choose exactly what I want to do with the day ahead and the week ahead. I'm more interested in my health. I want to be around a lot longer. I'm interested in my husband's health. I want him to be around a lot longer. Things that I completely undervalued for years of working. Things I took for granted, thinking they'd always be there. So what do we do with all of this now? And I definitely don't think the answer is regret. I'm not regretful about the life that I built and the time that I spent. I'm just mindful now of those moments that I sacrificed. And I have to be thankful of the sacrifice, because it got me to where I am now, which is retiring in my 50s with still enough energy and still enough health and time to be able to make the most of it. I never look back and think, God, I wish I'd never worked so hard, because at the time I enjoyed it. At the time, it was definitely a big part of my life. And so that's not true. But I do think that a lot of us are reassessing the deal that we made back then. Work hard now and live later. Because eventually, later does arrive. And I've mentioned before in one of my other videos, my best friend often said to me, Angela, you're wishing your life away. Because every year I would be saying, that's another year gone. Another year I'm closer to retirement. Another year I'm closer to freedom. And I was really focused on just getting through every month until those 12 months had gone and I'd moved into a new year. And I'd say to her, my reply was always, I'm not wishing my life away. I'm wishing time away so I can have a life. And here I am. But when that life arrives, you start asking very different questions like, what is it all for? How am I going to find meaning in this new space when I'm not the workhorse any longer? Who am I now without that specific role that I had for so long? What do I want this next chapter of my life to look like when it isn't written? And maybe this next stage of life isn't about retirement after all. Maybe it's just about redesigning life and still finding myself being productive, being of value, just removing things that don't matter any longer. I think it's definitely more about finding ways to slow down emotionally, not just slowing down practically. And honestly, I don't think I'm alone in this. I think that many Gen Xers are quietly trying to figure this out right now because we spent decades becoming useful, productive, reliable. And now we're trying to figure out how to simply be us again without constantly trying to prove our value. And when I think back, I don't think that Generation X regrets being resilient. We don't regret becoming adaptable and hardworking and having the life that we had. I think many of us are just beginning to question whether we spent too much of life believing happiness existed somewhere in the future and letting life just move past us while we're busy preparing for it. And maybe that's the real wake-up call in midlife. Not that we worked too hard, but that suddenly time feels very real for us. And maybe the second half of life isn't about striving equally hard in retirement and at retirement. Maybe it's just about living life a little bit more honestly about what we're prepared to sacrifice moving forward and being more intentional about how we spend our time and a lot more present. And I'd genuinely love to know how other Gen Xers are feeling about this. Do you think the trade-off was worth it? Or do you sometimes feel like you spent too much time in the past preparing for the future? And then when you get there, you're still completely unprepared for it. I'm not sure I know how to be retired. I'm not sure whether I know how to be at peace. I'm not sure if I know what to do with all of this space and this time, but I'm looking forward to finding out. And little moments like 2 days ago, the sun was shining and my husband and I found ourselves sitting on 2 lounges on our deck, just listening to the birds singing and the breeze through the trees. And it was so peaceful. There was no background noise. We barely spoke to each other. But that was the first time that I think we really done that. Just sitting quietly, enjoying the sounds of nature around us. And that was amazing because, again, I'm somebody who's a planner and I had nothing else going on in my brain other than just enjoying that one moment. And it was blissful, I have to say, and I don't think I've used that word very often in the last 40 years of working. Even in the last 18 months of retirement, I don't think I've ever sort of felt blissful moments. But I did. I found it 2 days ago. And hopefully I'll have more of those moments. So again, my question is, how are you finding this new phase of your life? Or if you're not there yet, how are you planning for it? What bliss do you think you'll find in your life in those small moments? I'd really love to know how things have been for you. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you for watching. I'm Angela. I look forward to hearing how you're finding it and what, your past and that history that we share together, that background of striving and working and building, has actually meant for your future. Take care. See you on the next one.